All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. First of all, thank you all for coming. And this is kind of a free form, so I can answer a few questions occasionally. And I did make the video. It's a two-part, so it's about 15 minutes each. It's hard to put 1,250 miles into a 30-minute video, but I did it. But it's not professional. You have to realize that. It's not like, National Geographic quality. It's more like on the lower scale. So the sound may be a little off occasionally, and it may not mesh exactly, but I hope it tells the story of what happened here and how this thing started. It started 3 years ago when I first did the Columbia River as an idea. I've done a lot of these paddling trips. I've paddled all over the West Coast from southeast Alaska all the way to Mexico, and I've whitewater kayak down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. I've done a lot of whitewater trips. So I'm a good paddler, I would say. Unfortunately, I blew out the toilet one time, so sorry about that. But so I wanted something different this time, and certainly paddling the Columbia is really kind of a way out there because very few people have ever done this. It's 1,250 miles. You have to get around 14 dams, which are big roadblocks in the river. And you also have to get across the U.S. border through Homeland Security. They don't especially like kayakers, especially you can't paddle through the border. You actually have to get out and walk around and go through their whole procedure, which is a little bit frustrating, but if you want to get back in the country, so a few people down in Mexico right now, I think would accept that. But like I said, I've done a lot of these, and I've satisfied my own curiosity about adventure, and have done all that, and I wanted to share it this time with other people, and I contacted my brother Matt, who lives in Western Springs, and said, "Hey, Matt, can we work with your school on this? Because I really wanted to share the experience and kind of show kids that there's more than what they see. It's more than their cell phones and their social networks and their games and all that. There's actually nature out there, the real video game, where you're in it and doing it." So I was fortunate enough to get Matt to help me, and through Matt, I met very special person, Diane Conmey. She works in the school with Matt, and her daughter is named Erica Reith, and her name is Ari for short. And so she passed away in 2003 from a car accident. And I thought, what a great way to kind of make a tribute to her and to tie in all the kids into this adventure. And so she kind of became my spiritual advisor on the trip. And believe me, with the difficulties I encountered, I needed her all the time. So the whole Columbia River is up here to the left. It starts way up in the Rocky Mountains in a place called Columbia Lake and a little town called Canal Flats. There's a little creek about 3 feet wide that feeds into this lake, and that's the beginning of the Columbia River. So Columbia is really famous because it's one of the places that Lewis and Clark came down in, I believe it was 1805 or something, and they came in where the Snake River comes in. They didn't come in up at the top. So I wanted to do the whole river, and the river is, some of it's natural and some of it's a lot of man-made. So all these dams actually create lakes behind it, have totally changed the environment, and have created huge roadblocks for salmon. And there's lots of issues associated with the Columbia River, but one that's really advantage to most people is the Columbia River system and all of its dams, which is not just the 14, actually creates 44% of the total energy used in the United States. And that's a pretty incredible number. The drainage area is the size of France. So this is a huge amount of water, and it comprises many, many big rivers. So as a paddler, it created a huge challenge because it's not just flat lakes and dams, but it's whitewater rapids and steep wall canyons and very, very remote areas that if you're a solo paddler, there's no one to call on. There's no one that's going to be there if you fall out of your kayak and get washed down the river. So you have to really take it with a lot of precaution and a lot of preparation to actually do a trip like this. And I think that's one of the reasons it makes it so difficult to do this. And only a few people do this a year. Myself and another person that I know of actually did it this year. So maybe 1 or 2 people a year. So there's more people that have summited Mount Everest than have actually paddled the whole Columbia. That's how small this number is. But so I'm going to go ahead and roll the first 15 minutes. So the first video is about the first half of the trip, and that's from Canal Flats to Grand Coulee Dam. So Grand Coulee Dam is, it's hard to show, but it's basically just across the border in Washington State. So you guys have any brief questions? Any questions? Jeff's got one right here. Go ahead, Jeff.
So when you started the trip, you were following the map on the trip. You went north first, correct?
Yes. So the Columbia River starts right here, it's called Columbia Lake, and then it goes 200 miles north. Makes a big hairpin turn at the top and then heads south. So the Columbia River actually runs about 500 miles in British Columbia. Oh, look at this. Wow. There's the Columbia River right here. And it goes way down here and makes a big turn. No. Sorry. Yes, so this whole section right here, the biggest town is right here called Revelstoke, and its population is about 3,000 people. So there are literally 500 miles of either nothing really, but river and forest and that type of thing. So good question, Jeff. Thanks for throwing that in there. One more. Well, that's a good question because a kayak's a small thing, right? And you sit down, your legs are inside the kayak, right? So, but you're actually braced in the kayak. There's a foot system in it. And the foot system actually connects to the back of the boat that has a rudder as a fin that goes down in the water, and there's a cable on it. And you push it with your feet, and it turns the boat for you. So if you have an 18-foot long boat, you can turn it pretty quickly with that. If you don't have a rudder, it takes a long time to turn a 18-foot long boat. But as far as sitting, you basically sit in there, and I have like a pillow that goes under my legs that props them up. So your legs just aren't hanging in there. They're actually kind of sitting on a pillow, which makes it much, much easier, and you can paddle for long distances that way. You can also take your feet off the pedals and stretch them forward. So my typical day would be, after getting on the river, it'd be about 2 hours. I then take a break, 15-minute break, and then another 2 hours, and I'll stop for lunch for about half an hour, and then another 2 hours, and around 2 o'clock, 2:30, you start looking for a place to camp because you don't want to be on the river at 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5. Starts getting dark, and once you get to camp, it takes at least an hour to set your tent up and get your stove going. And a lot of the actual physical work of this whole trip is the camping part of it. Setting it up in the morning, taking it down, setting up the evening, taking it down, camping, etc. So you'll see from the video that. One more question, and then I'll start the video. Yeah, good question. So the food's always a big thing because I can't pack 72 days worth of food in my kayak. I'm sorry. It's not that big. So I started planning the trip a year ahead of time. So before the trip, all the food for the trip was pre-packaged into plastic bags that were divided into days. So I'd have... I can only carry 7 to 11 days worth of food in my kayak. Otherwise, it just gets too heavy and I'm unable to carry it. So I would prearrange the food. I'd put it in boxes. I had 8 boxes, and then I had logistics people that were in Washington State, excuse me, that would ship the boxes to the locations before I got there. So if I'm going to be somewhere in 2 weeks, they're going to send the box out so the food's there a week ahead of time. So I had 8 different shipping locations that I picked up as I came down the river, and then I supplemented my food by going to the grocery store or a little mini mart or whatever I could find out there, which is very there's very few places, unless you go to a bigger town, that you actually can get food in a good enough quality of food that you can eat, because I'm paddling 25 miles a day. I'm burning 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. And so you have to eat a lot of calories to do that, and you have to have the right kind of food. Otherwise, it could create huge problems for you. So I hope I answered your question. So bear with me here. And again, this is free form, so enjoy.
Hello everybody, my name is John Kuntz, and this is Aries Adventure, a 1,250-mile paddle down the Columbia River, where I'll have to get around 14 dams, a U.S. border crossing, and lots of open water. Along the way, I'll be sharing my adventure with Lincoln Elementary in Oak Park, Illinois. It's an elementary school full of eager kids to learn about adventure. For a paddler, the Columbia River creates a major challenge. It's 1,243 miles long, has 14 main stem dams, and 1 U.S. border crossing. All are extremely difficult for paddlers, and that's why so few have done the river. It is a major challenge, and more people have summited Mount Everest than have paddled the entire Columbia.
Leaving Canal Flats, August 3rd, 2018, on John's Columbia River trip, Aries Adventure. Here we go. It's going to be a long trip.
Shortcut.
Hey kids, it's John, and I'm just approaching one of the more difficult sections of the Columbia River here. It's called Red Great Canyon, and it's basically a steep wall canyon with whitewater rapids in it. And the question I get asked quite a bit is, aren't you afraid? And I always say, of course I'm afraid. Beautiful. Incredible. Nothing like being here in the moment right now, right before going into this canyon. See the whirlpool on the right? The water's much higher now. I mean, oh, look out. Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Here we go. Big whirlpools open up, man. Gotta stick with it. Keep your paddle down. Woohoo! Holy crap, that was fun. Oh my god. That was cool. That was really cool. Here we go again!
Holy shit. Oh man, this is these thunderclaps are shaking my teeth. They're so close, man. This is crazy.
Well, there's only three ways to get around these Columbia River dams. The first is to walk your kayak around like I'm doing here. My kayak is balanced on a set of wheels and I'm pulling it from a rope from the front. The second way is to go through the lock. A lock is basically a gate that allows you to get from one part of the river to the other. They're the most convenient and easiest to use. The third way is to get a ride in a vehicle around the dam. Sometimes difficult. Out of the 14 main stem dams, 5 have locks and 9 have none.
perfect day. Loving being out here on the water. It's nothing like it. Just being in the moment here. Enjoying the wind at my back, the sun on my face, clear sailing ahead. Just gotta love it. This is what I do it for. It's the big reason why I go through all the hardships to be out here to make this happen. Just be in the moment and enjoy it. This time I'm taking Ari along with me. She's my inspiration, and I call on her when I need help, and most of the time she comes through. So her spirit's with me, and realize Diane and John and the rest of your family, how important that is to me. Right now she's at my back giving me a little push. Sweet. Here, I'm paddling the whole Columbia. So, where'd you start out at? It's a place called Canal Flats on Columbia Lake. Yeah, so if you guys have any teachers or anything, just go ahead and give them a card, and we'll have to include them in our little adventure. There's an adventure curriculum on the website.
How cool! They could learn more from you than they could in the school.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, my boyfriend's got some great nieces, a great niece and nephew. They live in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
The one would rather just get on his electronics and sit all day than do anything. And it's like, God, get out. Sometimes go look at
windy out here, but we'll make it work. Made it to Grand Coulee. That's the big boy right there. And unfortunately, the winds got up the last half hour, and I'm kind of fighting it to get to the boat ramp up here. And you kind of see it in the distance there with some cars. Halfway, man, this is awesome. 608 miles. And can't believe I've made it halfway. It's an incredible experience. Hey everybody, it's John, and this is a short little video to thank everyone for your support in the Columbia River adventure. I'm halfway. I'm here at Grand Coulee Dam, and just so happy to be here. And it's been a great half trip so far, and I'm expecting another great half trip. Please, please, please share this with your kids, your grandkids, your neighbor kids, with teachers. Teachers, please share it with your classrooms. It's an awesome learning experience for kids, and that's one of my goals. And again, I just thank everyone for sending the cards and the letters and just beautiful comments on Facebook. Thank you. I'll keep you updated on the next half. Well, that's half number one. So 600 miles in 15 minutes. That's pretty good. So I'm at Grand Coulee, which is right here. So 140 miles is Lake Roosevelt, and then into Canada. So, yeah. Question over here? No, I've been asked that quite a bit, actually. No, I'm afraid I'm going to shoot myself. No, I didn't carry any weapons. You know, some people do carry weapons, and I certainly respect that. Me personally, I try to talk my way out of it. And I've talked a few bears down, so. You could have brought it. Yeah, for sure. You'd have to have the permit to get it into Canada and stuff, but yeah, you could have. Over here? Up at the beginning, it was very cold, right, Matt? It was probably, 45-ish? And then the farther you get down, especially when you get in the big lakes, it warms up to probably 65, 70 degrees, so.
Is there a reason why you waited till August?
Yeah, mostly, well, there's a lot of planning that goes in, but yeah, a lot of people start this trip in June, but June is high water, so that's when the glaciers and all the snow is melting out of the mountains. So running Red Grave Canyon would be impossible in June. It'd be way too high and too dangerous. So I waited till August because, mostly because of my business. I'm very busy in July. It's a high month for me. And by August, I got everything planned ahead of time, and I could sneak away. But yeah, I think August was great. So August, September, 2 great months. And then when I got into the coastal range in October, that's when I got rain and cold and bad weather. So majority of the trip was really, really great weather. Right here. Cruising speed's about 4.5 miles an hour. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're going, I'll make it easy on you. Let's say we're going 4 miles an hour and I'm going 20 miles a day. That means I'm paddling how many hours? 5 hours. So, and you add in your breaks, and all of a sudden you got a long, long day. And by the time you get to the end of the day, you're wishing for a very nice sandy flat beach. Believe me, I start looking at 2 o'clock, and my rule is by 3 o'clock, I'll take whatever I can get. But at 2 o'clock, I'm a little bit picky, and as it gets closer to 3 and 4 o'clock, I get more desperate. But sometimes it works out. I actually passed up a great camp once, and I ended up paddling until 5 o'clock, which is late for me. And I ended up having to hike my stuff up about a 20-foot embankment full of rocks and stuff, and set my tent up and got my dinner, and I was eating at dusk and, putting my stuff away. And, I couldn't get my stuff like away from the bears and the trees, so I put it in my kayak, which was a pretty safe place to put it. But in the middle of the night, I was woken up by this clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. All of a sudden, I woke up and I'm hearing this, and what's that? You know, got a little peephole out of my tent, and I look out, and there's a herd of elk that had walked around my tent because it was in their way. And I'm standing, my tent's about this wide and this long, you know, and the elk are like right next to me. And so I'm like being as quiet as I can. I don't want to spook the elk because that would be a bad thing. So, Bob? Homeland Security. That was a little sketchy, but no, I've had other trips where I've had bears right next to the tent, and I've had a trip with mountain lions coming into camp, and you know, so I've had animals around, but you know, a lot of common sense and some patience really pays off. For the most part, yeah. We actually did have a situation when my daughter was with me. We were paddling Hanford Reach, which you'll see on the next video, and this whole boat full of fishermen just decided they were going to pick on us and were just throwing out obscenities at us as we're paddling by, you know, this blip kayakers. And you know, there's no reason for it because I don't know them. They don't know me. I'm just passing through. So, you know, you just meet all kinds. But there's a question right here.
What kind of shipping would be required to use a lock system the size of the
Yeah, so the lock you saw is actually a small one. So this is mainly for moving logs. They bring logs in, they raft the logs up and put them into the lock, and then they pick them up on the other side. But lower down, the last 4 dams in the Columbia have locks that can take barges and tugs that are 3 football fields long. They're huge. You know, and that's where the major commerce is on the lower part of the river. This one was mainly for pleasure boaters and for timber. So, good question.
How long did your brother kayak with you at the beginning?
It was pretty long.
Yeah.
It felt really long.
You know, I was about ready to leave him a few times, but you know, that whole ploy of being in the marsh, that was just to get rid of him. There's a question way in the back. Rick? I'm really not a fisherman, and, you know, I do occasionally fish, but I don't like to cook fish in camp because it just attracts bears. But my brother loves to fish, and there's some great fishing there for sure. And when I got down to the lower part of the river where there was still salmon, there was a lot of fishing going on, Native American fisheries, and you know, I saw a 25-pound king salmon. You know, so they still have some good fish there. Dean? At the beginning, you have current, and once you get into the lakes that back the dams up, of course, there's no current there. But once you go through the dam, get to the other side of the dam, usually you'll have 4 or 5 miles of current, and that can help maybe a couple miles per hour. So I might be going 6 miles per hour there, but I would say not a lot for sure. One more question? Okay. Thanks for so I stop about once every 2 hours, and I paddle 6 hours a day. So I'll stop at break in the morning, and I'll stop for lunch, and I'll break in the afternoon, and then I'll be done for the day. So good question.
All right, Darren, come on up. Thank you. Darren, what's your question?
I'm Darren. Did you like your food?
Like your food you're eating.
Eat.
Who else has it work? Here, Adam's got a question.
Don't
Got a
get in
question
the way.
about the dam. Hold on. Say hi.
How many gallons of water goes in the dam? Darren, you already had it.
All right, where's Casey? Casey, per minute. Uh-oh, Casey's perplexed.
So we manage water, and we work in cubic feet
Either
per
go on
second.
or go as fast as you can.
ACFS measurement, and I believe our turbines, I have no idea.
We can fill chemical
We can fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool in 5 seconds.
What?
Wow.
5 seconds?
Whoa.
John talked about this already, but John's been paddling through all kinds of different places, from deep forests and high mountains to, into deserts, and we paddled through a bunch of places where they're growing wheat, and we're just now moving into a place, there's one. We're just now moving into a place where they grow apples, and we're going to paddle through apple country for a while. And I'll bet if you guys look at your apples when you buy them at the store, they might even say grown in Washington. And I don't know if you guys can see back behind, but there's orchards where there's the first of the apple orchards, and that's where your apples come from, where we are right now.
here. We're just portaging McNary Dam. They have a nice portage route here that's signed, which is very unusual. But you can see it's a gravel road and mostly downhill, so not too bad. What do you think, Kelly?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Well, we'll show you how we're doing it. Picking this piece of wood up and moving forward. Oregon right now. We're heading towards Arlington, but we're gonna stop before we get there at Queensland County Park, and that's gonna be the end of the trip for Kelly. I think 12 miles, 13 miles.
13 miles today.
13 miles today, which is about half of what we've been doing, and he's gonna pick Kelly up tomorrow, so we get to sleep in tomorrow morning. Yay! Right?
Yeah.
Sleeping in tomorrow for sure.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. Well, what else you want to say?
It's nice out today. It's a little
Yeah.
hot already, which kind of.
It's going to be a scorcher today, but that's what you got to put up with. Long sleeve shirts and hats and everything. Also, we got a nice little wind at our back, which we're very thankful for, and some current. It's not very noticeable, so we get a little help today, which is always awesome, and we'll get her done, right?
Yeah.
Right on. All right, Merry Christmas, everybody. Washington's on the right-hand side of the river and Oregon's on the left, and thank God there's trees. I've finally gotten back into the trees. You can see the multiple basalt layers there from huge flows. So, back on the river, my little
thing that supports my gimbal broke off when they did the portage to John Day, so I'm having to hold the camera now, which is fine. I can definitely handle it. So a little bit more dexterous fingers. So trying to make Hood River today. I've got kids video conference at 12:30. So I'm hoping to make it probably close to Hood River. So again, back on the river, and it's time to get going.
Just went through the Cascade Locks, and it's pretty cool. Not much in there. The Legacy was in there, so that was awesome. I saw that boat 2 days ago. So yeah, cool. I'm gonna turn this around, and there's Bridge of the Gods. Incredible bridge. Getting ready to go under that. Here we are on the Columbia River, and I'm here with my son Keith over here. And this big pointy rock here is called Beacon Rock. It's a very famous rock, Lewis and Clark. And we just left the Bonneville Dam, which is way back there. And we've got a really nice current with us today. Looking forward to a really fun day. A little overcast, but it makes for great paddling. So I'm heading down the river here, looking for animals, looking for jumping salmon, and got a little current going with this, so that's good. All right, more later. Hey Keith, what's up? In Portland, we're in Portland. Yeah, 1,100 miles. That's Portland International Airport right there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. We got it all done in 30 minutes. That's cool. So yeah, there was a couple questions. One about my camera. So I've done a few of these trips, and I had a GoPro, and I put it on my head once, and one time I had it mounted on my shoulder. And you're always moving, and the boat moves. So this time I bought what's called a gimbal, and basically the camera mount. It's the same thing they use under helicopters to do videos with. It swivels and takes all the action out of the camera. So really improved the videos a lot. It wasn't as shaky as it was in the past. So, and then there was another question over here, I think, that somebody asked during the film. No? Oh, was it half and half? It was, it took 4 weeks to get, about 4 weeks to get to Grand Coulee and 6 weeks to get to Astoria. Yeah, so it was a little bit longer, the second half was. Yeah, so I actually forgot my gloves. Ouch. No, I had calluses, and you'll notice some of the photos, I have the white thing over my wrist here. So I'm actually pulling my shirt over, and I cut slits in the sleeve of the shirt to fit my hands through. You got to do whatever it takes. Yes, I had it's made by Spot. It's called a GPS tracker, and it's a cool device. It actually allowed the kids to follow me. So it updates a website every 10 minutes on my location. So the kids in the classroom could pull it up on their computers and say, oh, where's John today? Oh, there he is. And then come back a couple hours later and see that I've moved. And it also has a couple other buttons on it. One that I can hit at the end of the day that basically sends out a message to this group of people, which is friends and family, which is, okay, I made camp, everything's good. And then it has another button that's kind of an emergency button, and you press that, and it says, I'm having trouble, I'm going to go to the next town, I'll call you when I get there. And then it has the red button, which is the SOS. If I press that, then it calls out the search and rescue, and we'll send, hopefully, someone out to find me. Yeah, I've had windy days where I couldn't paddle, and there was... I don't think there was any day that rained so hard I couldn't paddle, but definitely the wind was a factor. And like if you're paddling, I kind of had a rule, like, I was averaging 4.5 miles an hour, but if it got down to like 2.5 or 2, I just quit for the day. It's just too much. You're expending way too much energy for the distance you're going, and you can easily go twice that distance on a regular day, so it doesn't make sense to paddle in rough windy conditions. No. It's I think it is a little bit camera because I do have a straight shaft on my paddle. What was the first part of the question? Did I capsize? No, I came close in the rapids. So I did have a more severe situation than you saw in the video here. I ran another rapid, which is called Rock Island, and it's actually a much more difficult rapid. The flow of the river, which is about 120,000 cubic feet per second, which is a huge volume of water, splits around this rock in the middle of the river. And so I ran it the year before, and it was low water, and I went to the right of the rock, and I was like, I'll just run it again. It shouldn't be that bad, but the water was 3 times as high this year. And when I ran it, I slipped down into the center of the rapid, and the water coming off the rock met the water coming out of this big eddy and created an enormous whirlpool that basically swallowed me up. And I was able to, at the last second, kind of brace on the wall. So you got this whirlpool going like this, right? And here I am, just braced on the side of the wall like this, going like this. And it held me for 10 seconds, which is a long time. And I took 1 second, I looked down into the mouth of the whirlpool, and at the bottom was just this circle with big churning white water in the bottom. And I just realized I didn't want to go there. And about the same time, I felt the back of my boat start slipping down into the bottom of the whirlpool. And I'm thinking, oh, this is my moment here, my Titanic moment. I'm going down. And a second later, the whole whirlpool collapsed and shot a huge volume of water, came up out of the bottom, lifted my boat up, and basically tossed me into the eddy on the right-hand side of the river. So I somehow escaped the jaws of the whirlpool, and as I'm drifting down the river, I realize my hand is shaking. I can hardly hold the paddle. So that was a close call. If I'd have capsized in there, it would have been very difficult to get my boat back. And, of course, everything's in my boat. It's my house. It's my camping gear, my cooking gear, my food. It's secured in hatches. So the front of and back of the kayak are hollow, and they have vertical wall called a bulkhead in there and a hatch on the top, and I put it in there in dry bags. So it's very compact. You have to really get everything out of the bags, the air and everything, and just somehow get everything in there. So I use Google Maps for GPS. So I didn't have additional GPS device. So you can actually use Google Maps, and it will show you where you're at, but on your phone. But it doesn't work if you don't download the maps. So before I'd go, like if I was in town and I'm going to be traveling another week, I'd go on and you'd have to scroll through. Like you have to get to whatever level you want. Like if you want real granular, up close, you get to that level and you just scroll through on your phone, and it'll save that for you. And then when you're out on the river, you can pull it up and get that. But if you just get an overview, that's all you get. You don't get the granular view, which is what you want. So you had to know what level you wanted. And I always selected 2 levels. I selected the overview level, which is more the basic one, which is, here's the river and here's the direction. And then the granular one, which you can see like beaches and rock outcroppings and stuff like that, which are more important. So with those 2 things, I was really able to identify a lot of features and a lot of places where I wanted to stop on the river and make a good plan for the day and for the week. So very good question. Dean? The kayak weighed 55 pounds, and it's made out of carbon. So very lightweight. It's super efficient. It's made for this type of paddling. So it's about 21 inches wide and 18 feet long. So the kayak's very light at 55 pounds. Similar kayaks weigh probably 75. So one of the things, the type of boat that I picked, and I have a whole slew of boats I could have picked. I have ocean-going kayaks and stuff like that. This one's great on flat water. It's very fast on flat water, and that's the majority of the trip that I did. So not so great in the rapids as you saw waves breaking over the top and stuff, but great on the flats, which is really where I need to make my time up. So.
What was your go-to food? Where did you take the most of it?
Like power bars, I guess. I don't know. Food was very, very difficult. Obviously, you're not taking fresh food, though. I'd supplement it when I go to town. I'd supplement it. First of all, I'd go out and eat the biggest dinner or breakfast I could get with as many calories as I could shove in my mouth. And then I'd go to the store and buy like some oranges and apples and, some fresh vegetables and eat those in the first couple days. And then the box of food I have has additional food in it, but some are heavy, like cans of food. So the whole goal is to eat the most heavy food in the quickest amount of time, so that then you're just paddling with light food, but you're losing all the flavor and all the good stuff. So by the end of the trip, the end of each segment, I was pretty desperate for some decent food. And so the gas beer thing was just great. I'd stop there again because that was awesome. And I must say I did stop at a few beaches where some local power boaters were having huge parties, and you have to go up and sell yourself, right? Because you're a stranger, right? So I'm like,
I'm on this big trip, and I'm just having a great time out here, and just and they're like, oh, really? Wow. Hey, you want a beer? There you go. That's how it works. So I did get some supplemental beer that way, but I didn't carry it with me because it's too heavy. I bent my rudder, yes. So the rudder is a piece of aluminum, and it flips down in the back of the boat and allows you to steer the boat. And so it's a lot of times, the river can be shallow and you don't see it coming. Also, when you're putting the boat in and taking it out, sometimes you can lean it and bend your rudder. And so you do have to be careful. I did run over rocks in my kayak, and can possibly put a hole in it. So, and there were some dangers out there for sure. So. The most difficult in which way? Dealing with the dam people, I can tell you. You could paddle in one day. You can paddle 3 dams in one day, if you're strong enough. So no, I mean you need someone there to get you around the dam because you're not going to make it through any other way. So, but there's lots of incredibly beautiful week-long trips you can do. Revelstoke is just spectacular. The first week we did has the most wildlife on the whole trip. I'd say from Chief Joseph down, even from Grand Coulee to Chief Joseph Dam was spectacular. The basalt cliffs and big outcroppings and stuff. It really kind of comes down to what you want to see and how much time you have, because there's only a few sections that I felt, man, this is just really, it's kind of ugly and there's houses everywhere, and like where Lake Chelan is a big area where there's a lot of tourism and recreation and apple orchards, and it's like one dock after the other for mile after mile. So there are some places where I probably wouldn't go back, but the majority of the river is just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And if you want to go touring, there's no place better. I've paddled up and down the west coast, Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Southeast Alaska. I had the same feeling out there of wilderness that I had actually being further out in the wilderness. So even though the river has a road that parallels it a lot of the way, there's sections, there's one section where 60 miles there's no road. There's no, so you can get that feeling and still be fairly close to a road, which means rescue. So good question, guys. Well, I don't look sinister. You're right. So I did this big trip. I got back to Port Gamble where I live, and I paddle there a lot. And there's a bridge called Hood Canal Bridge, and it crosses the Puget Sound, and it's probably 2 miles wide. And I paddle out there all the time. And so I got back, and I'm like feeling good, and the wind's coming from the north, and the tide's coming in, pushing towards the bridge, so I want to paddle on the other side. So I say, I'm just going to go after this little paddle. So I head out. I got down towards the bridge, and I got on the other side, and I noticed there's a state patrol car up on top of the bridge, right? So I think, wow, they're getting traffic there, right? So I paddle all 2 miles down the bridge, and there's cars on the bridge and stuff, and I'm a quarter mile off the bridge, so you only have to be 150 feet. So I get to the other side, and I'm going to paddle back, but I notice that the wind has come up, and it's really choppy on that side, so I decide to turn around and come back on the same side, and all of a sudden I see this boat coming in the distance very, very fast, and it's one of these patrol boats, these fast attack patrol boats. And a fast attack patrol boat is basically a high-speed pontoon boat with a turret-mounted machine gun coming right at me. Of course, I don't think he's coming at me because I don't think he's coming for me, and he just kind of makes a big circle in front of me, and he washes me with his boat wake, and he goes over to the bridge, and I think, what's that? And then out of my ear, I hear a siren up on the highway passing, and then all of a sudden when it gets to the bridge, it stops.
So now I'm thinking, what's going on with this? And so I paddle under the bridge, and I'm heading back home, and it's only about a mile, and here's this boat right behind me with the turret-mounted machine gun following me. Which way are you going? Are you going to take out at the park? And I'm so upset, is all I do is I go this way, and he says, take out the park. I go that way. I couldn't even talk to him. I was so upset. So it turns out somebody called the state patrol on me for paddling next to the bridge, and they called Bangor Submarine Base, and they sent their fast attack patrol boat after me. And I'm going, these guys got to have something better to do than this. Because I'm paddling 4 miles an hour. They're going 60. No, the whole homeland thing is protecting our assets. And it was difficult getting across. You know, they're not working with me at the U.S. border was just ridiculous. They could have sent someone down, would have saved me 3 hours of toil and trouble, but they didn't. So, you know, you just deal with it. And it turned out when I got up there after climbing this really steep hill, and the guy's like, where's your, I gave him my passport, and he's starting to ask me, you got this, you got any guns, you got et cetera. I'm going, man, you just got to hold on. I got to catch my breath here. And so after that happened, he kind of settled down a little bit and just asked me the regular questions. And then after that, we just sat there and chatted for like 20 minutes because there's no cars going through this border crossing. This is a very remote place. So at the end, I said, you know, is there an easier place to get in the river? And he looks at me and goes, yeah, once you get up the hill, then it's a couple miles. And I'm like, hill? What hill? It turns out there was another hill of equal or greater stature than the hill I just climbed. So anyway, it was quite a toil to get back in the river around the border crossing, and we're trying to resolve that issue for future paddlers and people that want to get around, because they should be able to come down to the river and take 5 minutes and check us through. One guy that paddled the river that I talked to, this is another guy that paddled it this year, the whole thing, and he said he got out, started walking up to the border station, his kayak's down on the river, and he got about halfway, and it was so steep and hard for him, he just decided, the heck with it, I'm going to turn around. He went back, got in his boat, and paddled through the border crossing without checking in, which I don't recommend, because I think the next time he gets into Canada or comes out of the United States, they're going to see that he's missing a stamp here. So you kind of want to follow their direction, because, you know, they're pretty serious about their business up there. So, yeah, Canadians are really nice people, though. That's a really good question. You know, what we've done there, obviously we created huge benefits for society, you know, but they've devastated the environment, basically. The salmon is the food chain for all the animals up there, the eagles, the bears, everything that eats it. And so what they've done is they've created these dams, which are huge roadblocks. And I'm not just talking about the salmon, because that's a huge issue, but you know, they've created these big lakes behind them, and they basically have drained mountains. And so a lot of the upper, especially in Canada, you're paddling along and there's no place to get out. It's just rock wall, and it's basically the side of a mountain. So you can't get out for miles and miles. And so there's no habitat there for the animals, so you don't see any large mammals next to the river other than in the marshlands and places like that. So, and, you know, as far as the salmon go, you can imagine, well, first of all, the salmon don't go past Chief Joseph Dam, which leaves, I think I said 700 miles or 800 miles of river. So now you've destroyed that, that food source for that amount of river. So it's, you know, probably hundreds of thousands of animals that have disappeared because of that. And so when you talk, I talked to the people that worked in the dam, I talked to the Native American fishermen, I talked to fishermen that are on the river, and everybody has a complaint about something. So it turned out that it was a really low salmon year, so people in the lower river were catching salmon, but at far fewer than they had ever caught in recent history. So there's no out migration for the salmon. They have to get around the dams, and sometimes they flush water through to push the little smolts down the river, but it's a big problem. The return rate has a lot to do with global warming and warming seas, and survival rate in the ocean is smaller. So every salmon species that goes up the Columbia right now is either threatened or endangered. So there's no healthy population of salmon now that basically built that whole ecosystem on the river. So it's kind of a dire situation, really. And the people that run the dams, they're great as far as people go, but they need to figure out a better way, because they need the environment. And when you go up there and you see what's happening to the small communities, the timber's gone. A lot of these communities only survive on tourism now, which is kind of a lower echelon of income for most people. So a lot of these little towns that I went through are, virtual ghost towns. I mean, there's people there, but, there's not a lot of people. And their whole economy is collapsed in a lot of ways. So, there's a lot of issues. And hopefully someday they'll address them effectively, because we do have the technology to create salmon spawning grounds and to get these fish around the dams much faster. It's just the will to do it, and that's where we're at. So, good question. Is really kind of a sad statement, but it's what's happening out in the real world. Any other questions? A couple more. Shoulders are killers, yeah. So that's a good question. You try to paddle as much as you can. I actually developed a shoulder problem just before the trip, about 6 months. I had bursitis in my shoulder, and I couldn't lift my hand above my shoulder. And so I got physical therapy and some help, and actually was able to do the trip, but with quite a bit of pain at the beginning. But it subsided after a while. So, I started about a year, and I was doing a lot of cycling because obviously I'm pulling that kayak up these hills. I need some leg strength. I was doing a lot of paddling, about 50 to 100 miles a week, more towards the end. So, you don't want to just start out green, because that's the most painful way to do it. And you really need some stamina to not just the paddling part, but you really need, you're moving that gear up and down that beach every day, twice a day. That's 100 pounds of gear. You better be ready for that. So, physically it was very difficult, not just the paddling, but, just the whole experience. Well, I actually did 250 miles the year before on this river, but other than that, I've done a lot of trips, a lot of 150-mile trips. Vancouver Island, especially. That's, I paddled a lot on Vancouver Island is one of the largest islands in the world. It's over 300 miles long. It's off the British Columbia coast. It's very remote. There's fishing villages, and that's about it. And I went out there 4 years ago with a complete greenhorn. This kid was like 18, and I decided we were going to go up to the north end of Vancouver Island, which is basically you're paddling in open Pacific Ocean. And we paddled 3 days out to this peninsula called the Brooks Peninsula. And on the third day, the weather came up, and it went from completely flat calm to like 35 knot winds in about 20 minutes. And we barely made it to this island. And it turns out that a storm had come in, and the storm basically was from southeast Alaska all the way to Mexico. They called it the Great Pacific Storm, and we had winds in excess of 70 knots. And we were pinned down on a beach for a week, and we ran out of food. He was too skinny to eat.
So I ended up calling the Coast Guard, and we were very fortunate that one of the Coast Guard cutters was there, and they actually came to rescue us. And they said that it was the roughest seas that the boat was ever in, and half the crew ended up throwing up. And this boat is 150 feet long. So we saw it coming up the channel where we were at, and it was the swells were so big that this boat would go down into the trough and totally disappear. I mean, even the conning tower and the antennas would disappear. Then the next thing you see it coming up the top, and then it'd break over the next wave. So you can get yourself into some bad situations that require help occasionally. So. I own an outdoor company, so I sell paddle sports gear and not just kayaking, but mountain biking, and I have 5 rental locations where I rent kayaks, paddle boards, mountain bikes, and I sell a big paddle sports seller on the internet, and that's kind of what I do. So yeah, in the summertime I have about 40, and then it goes down to 2 in the wintertime because we closed all our locations. So it's a fun business. It's a challenging business, and obviously I get to learn a lot about kayaking and can, teach kayaking. I've been teaching kayaking forever, so yeah. Jeffrey. So this is getting a little personal, but if you're willing to sit here and listen to this, I mean, I'll tell you. So yeah, I grew up in Kankakeean, and I love the outdoors, and ever since I was a kid, I'd been paddling the Kankakee River, and I went to school down at Southern Illinois University and got a degree in forestry. I was going to be a forest ranger, and that was my dream. And right after college, I decided, made a bad move. I moved to Dallas, Texas, and spent 4 years there. But then I decided I got to make a change in my life and moved to outside of Seattle. And the first thing I did there was I went on a river rafting trip and through whitewater rapids, and I was like, man, this is really fun. I got to do some more of this. And while I'm out there, I see these little plastic things just jetting around the river and playing in waves and stuff. I go, that even looks more fun. So I got a friend that actually was doing it that I met there and became friends with, and he taught me how to whitewater kayak. And then I started teaching kayaking, whitewater kayaking. I got certified, and I actually got pretty good at it. And so I started teaching whitewater kayaking, and I started a small business, and I was still doing this other thing. And over time, I just thought, wow, this thing's going to really blow up and be big, and I can do tours. And, so I just kind of went from a garage business and built it up over time. And it's now 32 years doing that thing. So some wonderful people that come out and see me. That's awesome. I definitely encourage everybody to come out to Washington State and enjoy the outdoors and nature, because it's beautiful out there. So great. No, you don't have to get in a kayak, but I'll probably try to encourage you to. Probably, because it's pretty convenient. It's pretty cool. Right now we have orca whales, we have humpback whales, we got gray whales, we got dolphins in Puget Sound, so it's a great time. We got salmon migration now. Everything revolves around the salmon, so it's wet, it's rainy there, yes, but the nature's still there, and the animals are still there, and we're still trying to create an environment to keep them there. So, great questions. I just want to thank everyone for coming. It's been awesome, and I hope that you will find adventure in your life, and stay healthy, be active, and just go for it. There's no reason to not go for it. Life is short, and take advantage of it. Thank you.